Our next speaker will be speaking in Portuguese, so if you returned your translation device, so just get one again. So it's Dr. Jorge Dyer, Jr. He's an endocrinologist, a professor of medicine at Centro Universitário Anápolis, and a clinical researcher in diabetes at the Hospital Geral de Goiânia. He currently occupies the position of General Secretary of the Brazilian Spiritist Medical Association, and he's the president of the Goiás Spiritist Medical Association in Brazil. Dr. Dyer has given a number of lectures throughout Brazil and Europe. Please welcome Dr. Jorge Dyer.
I'd like to thank to Professor Doi for the invitation, and to Dr. Marlene Nobre for spiritual support to be here. And I beg your pardon, but I will speak in Portuguese to be sure for what I will say today. Nós vamos falar pouco da nossa revisão sistemática, em linhas gerais, e é um trabalho em conjunto com o Dr. Giancarlo Lucchetti, que está aqui presente, e o nosso querido Rodolfo, que também está presente, acadêmico de medicina, e não seria possível sair sem eles, a ajuda deles. E nós vamos, então, entrar nesse árduo campo que é buscar as evidências científicas na literatura médica sobre os indícios de sobrevivência após a morte. E nós vamos, então, fazer um apanhado histórico, e eu começo com Allan Kardec, porque quando codificou o Espiritismo, em uma época em que a ciência já tinha seus critérios rígidos para a época, não podemos deixar de dizer, ele aceitou os critérios e criou métodos para que pudesse abordar de forma sistemática a mediunidade. E ele, então, buscou demonstrar evidência de comunicação entre os mortos e os vivos. Ele criou uma forma de controle para apurar o significado das comunicações, que ele chamou de controle universal dos ensinos espíritas. E o que é muito interessante, que Allan Kardec preocupou-se já naquela época sobre o risco de fraude. Então, nada mais justo que colocar Allan Kardec como um dos pioneiros na pesquisa nessa área da sobrevivência. Quando nós, ainda analisando a parte histórica, olhamos para as diretrizes da Society for Psychical Research, nós vemos que eles... Opa, apertei errado. Eles também tinham toda uma preocupação em seguir os critérios científicos e assim fizeram durante todo o período em que essa sociedade chamou a atenção e chocou o mundo científico. E as diretrizes da Society for Psychical Research, tanto a britânica quanto a americana, podem ser sintetizadas nessa frase de William James, onde ele coloca as diretrizes sérias, rigorosas, para que toda e qualquer evidência possa ser aceita e publicada, pudesse ser aceita e publicada nos proceedings da Society of Psycho Research. Serve de modelo e de exemplo. Aqui a gente traz um dos primeiros estudos, ainda que seja uma pesquisa de opinião, mas um dos primeiros estudos tentando seguir ou esboçando a metodologia que hoje temos como científica. Uma delas é o estudo de Sigwick, onde ele pesquisa as evidências de percepção extrasensorial entre ingleses. E eles obtiveram 17 mil respostas. Dessas 17 mil respostas, ele tem 10% de positivo e 15% deles viram aparições de pessoas mortas. Ainda no campo histórico, nós devemos citar Joseph Banks Rhine, que trouxe uma nova metodologia para a pesquisa psíquica e teve a telepatia como foco central de suas pesquisas. Essa parte, depois de Rhine, nós temos hoje a percepção extrasensória.
We have the extrasensory perception and super extrasensory perception replaced in the, it became one more postulate to justify the cases of mediumship. To close the historical background, I would like to mention Ernesto Bozano, who in Italy published many articles, but unfortunately they were published in philosophical journals or without scientific validation, but his experiments were really well done. Most of them were descriptive studies, stories of cases, but he did experiments with people as they were dying, mediumship, communication between people who are alive, telepathy, and also various other kinds of spiritual studies. I'll say Ricci, who was founder of the Metaphysical Society, which was not really present in his epic, but he's a Nobel Prize of Science. He had a capacity of production which is tremendous because he researched lots of different matters, including immortality was a topic of his research during his whole life. Today, things have become harder. Richard Levinson has taught us a lot in his writings about evolutionism, and he also teaches a lot with this comment that he makes on the book of Carl Sagan, giving the idea of how it is difficult to work in this area, how spaces are tight, because there exists an a priori rejection in the name of materialism of any and all article in the opinion of Richard Levinson that represents this kind of study in the scientific area. Therefore, there's very little space available in the journals that are very important and have great impact among the readers. We have to have a divine foot pushing in the door. That's what the materialists say. But in spite of this, Cardenha, in a very optimistic way, he is able to perceive that in spite of this positioning of Richard Levinson, we have a space for publication. And this is what has made articles come out of its scientific type today, researching evidence of survival of consciousness after death of the physical body. Our work consists of a systematic review following the criteria of systematic review, which should be followed. We divided it into 3 phases. We looked for scientific articles in medical databases and medical articles. We chose 5 databases which we have access to with greater ease, and we did our research using terms that in a conversation with researchers that are more experienced we thought would be adequate to cover the multitude of articles that exist about a topic. In the second phase, we selected the papers that met the criteria of the systematic review. And in the third phase, we are going to do an analysis of these selected articles and try to establish whether these articles are able to present to us a uniform population capable of being sufficient for a meta-analysis. So, we chose in this group with medical conditions capable of demonstrating evidence of survival or independence of consciousness in relation to the brain. Principally these groups. And we established the criteria of inclusion in phase 1. They have to be original studies, prospective studies, case reports, clinical trials, and cohort studies. In the second phase, we're only going to only remain prospective studies, transversal studies, cohort studies, the RCT studies, retrospective studies, and control of cases. Nonetheless, what we can say is that for the third phase, of the 1,600 articles analyzed, very few get to phase 3. In that phase 3, we're going to do this analysis of the studies using the scales that we have for each kind of study, whether it's transversal, or perspective, or longitudinal. First, as I said at the beginning, I'm not going to bring results yet of the research. Today, I'm not able yet to form these conclusions, but talking about the major topics in near-death experiences, what's interesting is that when, for curiosity, I went to UpToDate.com, which I recommend to my students, and I looked up near-death experience. I didn't have any return. That is, the editors of UpToDate.com don't consider near-death experience a medical condition. Nonetheless, in wikidoc.org, Dr. Michael Gibson of the FDA is one of the supporters of wikidoc.org. We find 13 results, and it's interesting that he takes the risk of defining the experience of near-death. So in this site, which generally offers students the opportunity of doing research, the worst thing is that students they go only to Google, they don't go into any other research sites. In this site, at least, we can find this description of near-death experience, which is a very honest entry about what is the near-death experience. When we analyze the articles in near-death experiences, those of the 521 articles that were chosen for the second phase, we can say that there exist 8 prospective or observational studies published in medical literature. And I'm bringing data from June from last year, updated until June of this year. We still haven't been able to include. And what we can realize is that near-death experiences are a topic that's still in great evidence because it's challenging. There exists a search of materialistic science to justify the near-death experience as a purely brain phenomenon. And so in these 8 articles, we would like to emphasize what we call the seminal article, the main article, which is that published by Dr. Lomo. But a study, fever Lomo, is a prospective study that's very elegant and consistent, the best one that we have about the near-death experiences. In the group of near-death experiences, we find just one Brazilian study, which is a case study in which Dr. Lukács participated, which is very interesting. The conversion, the real conversion of a man convicted to prison. He was a person committed to prison because of death. He was a murderer of 4 victims. And he had a fight in the prison. He is knifed. He's taken to the hospital, and he has a near-death experience during the shock. He comes back from the near-death experience, changed. He asked to go to the cell of his greatest enemy in the jail, and for the great surprise of the jailers, he reconciles with the greatest friend, and today he is a preacher of a Protestant religion in São Paulo. A fantastic change because of the near-death experience can be a good idea for some serial killers and some psychopaths. What's interesting in this case is the transformation of that man. This article, although it's just a case study, it doesn't get into phase 3 of our study. At least I would like to mention it because it's the only Brazilian article in Brazil about near-death experience. On another topic, which is out-of-body experiences, we don't find anything in up-to-date nor in Wikidoc. Because we have access to wiki.org, I'm going to try to put an entry in about out-of-death experiences, and there's not anything in up-to-date either. We don't have longitudinal studies or prospective studies about out-of-body experiences. We have 12 transversal studies which are just about out-of-body experiences because most of the studies are related to out-of-body experiences in psychiatric disorders. So of all of the studies analyzed, in more than 200 articles that we analyzed, only 12 are transversal studies carried out with healthy people. We don't have Brazilian studies on this topic. And we have some questions because the terms that we have found in out-of-body experiences that normal people tell as autoscopy and hutoscopy are medical descriptions of phenomena that occur in pathological conditions. It's very difficult for you to have control of this kind of experience in healthy people. These autoscopy phenomena that are common in certain cases of epilepsy that healthy people may have in certain conditions if they're able to leave the body. We don't find medical articles or scientific articles in the indexed journals in those bodies of study. We don't find articles of autoscopy in people who are healthy. Another topic that we researched was end-of-life experiences. What's interesting is that Dr. Peter Feller, who is the great name in this area, he follows the English tradition followed by William Barrett, the physicist, who's one of the fathers of the telephony. Steve Jobs is the head of iPhone, but this is possible due to Barrett's experiences. And Barrett had as a focus of his research the apparitions at the time of death, end-of-life experiences. In this tradition, Dr. Fenry, he describes in this book, which is free on the internet, really it's just a little work. He describes the two types of experiences on the deathbed. One of them he calls transpersonal experiences. And something very interesting of the experiences on the deathbed, at the moment of death, because in my training, both as a medical student and then as a resident, I was working in intensive therapy units. Very often I had my attention called to the fact that to what people would say just moments before they died. At my time as a resident, I had a notebook where I wrote down the visions that my patients described. And still, as a resident, I had an observation, a personal observation, that I didn't even think about publishing it, that moments before death, my patients would stop smiling, and they would take on an attitude either very serene or very upset, but they would describe the presence of someone in their life. In truth, what really called my attention was with a doctor, when I went back to my city, my birth city, I went to a woman that I knew very well. I would go to her house sometimes to have a snack. I'm fat, not for no reason at all. At the time of death, she told me, just before she died, she told me, she said, Manuel came tonight. Manuel was her husband. I said, well, Dona Maria, how wonderful. So on this night, when he comes tonight, don't resist. Leave your body and go with him. It's time for you to leave. And I didn't realize that my colleague radiologist who was taking care of the case was at my side. I left the room. He came after me. He stopped me in the hall and said, I'm going to sue you. What do you mean? Why do you sue me? You are doing terrorism with my patient. I said, she's a spiritist. She accepts. Her whole life she believed in this. He said, I'm going to insist in talking with her daughter. Her daughter was an advanced worker at the central bank in Brazil, and coincidentally, her daughter happened to be coming along in the hallway. When she came by us, I said, Pedro, is her son, I said, Mr. Pedro, this colleague did terrorism with your mother. He said that certain Manuel is going to appear tonight, and she ought to go with him in peace and die. Pedro was excited. He gave me a hug, and he said, Manuel is my father. This is going to go well. And that night she did disincarnate. These experiences are common in people who live, close to the hospital. And what's very interesting in the description of Peter Henrik, a final meaning end-of-life experiences, where people reach a degree of understanding and they leave the person prepared. The person is ready to go and leaves everything arrangement as if they wanted to leave comfortably. It's a work that everybody can reach through the internet. And going back to our more serious study, we found 5 very important studies about end-of-life experiences. Marvelous studies. And of these studies, Dr. Peter Henrik, we're going to see, he appears in 3 of these big important studies. Of these great studies, we also have some questions to be raised. Because the deathbed phenomena can be confounded with hallucinations. It's not uncommon for a patient to receive antipsychotics so that these, quote, hallucinations will disappear. After we have the use of Spiritist, can be used with certain safety in older people, some doctors do not hesitate to, at the very first sign of the so-called hallucination, they don't hesitate to investigate whether it is a deathbed phenomenon or it's really just a hallucination. So they use a Spiritist. And sometimes we lose reports. Another point of questioning was that lots of the studies are done with reports on caregivers or relatives. The case of this study, which is very interesting, it's a relatively simple methodology, but it's a very detailed analysis and seriously done, published by Dr. Peter Fenwick. And what's interesting is that not only the reports of near-death experiences, but he calls it deathbed coincidences. The coincidences that occur. Last year, I had the chance to talk to Dr. Fenwick in a quick conversation during an event in London. And his experience about the coincidences at the time of death are very similar to that which is told by Ernesto Bolzano. It's a clock that stops on the time of the death of the person, the telephone that rings without anybody at the other end, noise in the room, or the appearance of that person who is about to die to another person at a distance. And Dr. Peter Fenwick was able to collect these descriptions, and he published them in this scientific article, which is of open access, and it's very interesting, and it's easy to read, even for those of us who are not in the medical area. Another topic is a very complex topic because it involves anthropological matters, a lot of psychiatry, which is spirit possession trance. It's a topic which has a lot of questions or issues, principally because most of these studies are focused on psychiatric disorders, especially schizophrenia, and when they are not about psychiatric disorders, we have a lot of them focused on anthropological matters that focus on cultural aspects of possession. Very few studies has as their focus possession or trance of possession by spirits just by themselves. This study, published by Dr. Alexandre Moreira Almeida of the Federal University of Juiz de Fora, we can see that there was a differentiation made between mediums from those who had a dissociation disorder. And what these studies surprisingly demonstrated was that not only that mediums were healthy, but compared to the general population, they had better indicators of health, better numbers. Another article, which we see here, trance surgery in Brazil, in which there was an investigation about mediunic surgeries in Brazil, trance surgeries, where 9 surgeon mediums were observed, and they gave 2 clinical reports. And they also did a neurophysiological study, the mediums. Which is more frightening was that one of these mediums had a lot of toxins in his carotid arteries of a Brazilian medical colleague, and it seems incredible, nothing happened. It's a very interesting article that shows something in a city close to mine became a real pilgrimage, Bagiana, where we have João de Deus, who operated on people who were so powerful as Oprah. She was there with him. The city of Bagiana is a city of 10,000 inhabitants, where a part of the city, the official language is English. People go into lunch shops with menus in English and service in English, and we see people from all parts of the world that are searching for trance surgery. Another topic is past life memories, and here we have a great name, Peterson, and in homage of the United States, because most of the original studies are American, and they bring a new challenge for materialistic science. I would like to, among so many different cases that have been published, I'd like to emphasize this article, perhaps because it's one of the few articles which is a kind of transversal study by Dr. Ian Stevenson. Although it does challenge science, most of Stevenson's studies are descriptive. And in this study, he does a transversal study about the correlation between violent death and the kinds of reincarnation. And what's interesting is that no matter how much we have implicitly that the larger the degree of violence or the more violent the death of the person was, more early is the reincarnation with memories of past lives. Statistically, this is a reality only for the Indian culture. That's what he found in his studies, especially in this one. Another topic of study is mediumship. Also, it's a topic full of issues and problems. First, due to the controversial methodologies used. After that, in the questioning, most of the articles allege that it may not be mediumship because there exists telepathy, a kind of supra-extrasensorial perception with a kind of manifestation in the location of consciousness. And in this area, we have a great diversity of studies published. This article from Dr. Julie Bechel and Gary Schwartz is a very interesting article because it brings us a methodology which is theoretically safe for the study of mediumship. It diminishes greatly the possibility of fraud, and it also reduces the possibility of contamination by telepathy. We have a project which is ready to go, study of mediumship and psychography. It also is done with the triple-blind methodology. We're waiting ethical approval. We can say that we didn't bring here, each time that we look at the methodology, we see that it involves 12 teams, 6 teams in each of 2 phases. Each team is blind to the other one. That is, no team knows what the other one has in terms of results. And we're also going to have a blind statistical analysis, and just one person will have access to all of the data, and that person is only going to come into contact with the teams at the final phase when all of the data has already been collected and analyzed. I confess that when I saw the slide from Dr. Arnault about the arrows that went from one side to the other, I looked at ours is even more confusing. If you look at a graph, I was going to bring that map for you. But I confess that for me to understand, after the first drawing was made, our group sat down, I went home, I woke up my wife, because before she was a psychologist, she was an engineer. I said, can you see here, can you understand the situation? After 2.5 hours analyzing it, we went to sleep, and I think that the next morning I'm going to have an answer, she said. And the next day, we did see that it's complicated, but it will come out. This has the idea of analyzing psychography, reducing to almost zero the possibility of fraud. We can also reduce to zero the possibility of success, and this is our risk. We have some other topics to cover too. Past life memories, we mentioned spirit detection, transcommunication, and mind-brain. These are objects of still more research. What we have brought, I can say, before I thank you, Brazil, all shined up in this NASA photograph. My house is right here. That the data we ought to be publishing soon, if God is willing, and don't be scared at the results, because we possibly have not included the data, but we're going to be very surprised because we're going to be able to displease both spiritists and materialists. Certainly, everyone will be displeased because science today has become so close to all of those who want to show that survival as a fact that can be carried into the academic forums, but publications to be accepted, first, they don't reach the major journals. After that, in their conclusions, if you don't leave open the possibility for a materialistic challenge in a very strong way, nobody will publish it. So the great hope, as is said in Brazil, is to appeal to the students, academics who are coming along, so that they can come into the university knowing that there exists a paradigm that Mario called post-materialism, so that in the future, who knows, we can have journals that will be accepted as much as the proceedings of the ASPR. Because God bless you all, and I thank you all.